Extreme macro close-ups are a hugely important part of not just cinema, but all kinds of professional work, from product commercials to natural history filmmaking. There are lots of fantastic different options for macro lenses out there now. But if you do this kind of macro work regularly, and you want consistency across different macro focal lengths, then you really want to be looking at a matched set of macro cinema primes. Now historically, these have been very expensive indeed, but recently we've seen most of the main affordable lens brands come to market with a set of macro cinema primes. And we have two of our favourites here, the DZOfilm Gnosis lenses, which we've talked about on this channel before a few years ago, and these brand new Laowa sword lenses, which come in at a considerably lower price point. So we thought we'd get them in the same place at the same time and shoot the same scenes with each of them side by side to see how they look. Okay, let's take a look at them physically. The Laowa swords are definitely much smaller lenses, and they weigh about half the amount of the Gnosis primes as well. But the Gnosis lenses do feel much sturdier, and the focus rings definitely feel smoother. They also have a much longer 300-degree focus throw, which is consistent across the range. The swords vary from as low as 36 degrees to 70 degrees. The Laowa lenses also vary quite a lot in their sizes. They all have a consistent 80mm front diameter though, apart from the wide 15mm, which is 100mm diameter. But I guess the main takeaway physically is that the Laowa swords are smaller and lighter, but they're not built quite as professionally as the DZOfilm Gnosis lenses, which just makes sense really, considering the price difference. There's also a big difference in the ranges available. The Gnosis primes have 4 lenses. There's a 24mm t2.8, which can do 0.8 times magnification, a 32mm t2.8 with 1 times magnification, the 65mm t2.8 is 1.33 times, and the 90 t2.8 is 1.5 times. So that one is the most macro of the set. With the swords, you get 6 lenses. There's a set of 4 in the middle, which roughly match the Gnosis lenses, and then there's a very wide and a very tele option as well. So the wide is a 15mm t4.1 with 1 times magnification, and that's very impressive for such a wide lens. There's a 25mm and 35mm t2.9, both with 1 times, and then a 60 and 100mm t2.9, which both can do 2 times, so much closer than any of the Gnosis primes can go. And then there's the really long 180mm t4.6, which can do 1.5 times magnification. The Laowa lenses also come in more mount options. They're PL by default, but you can optionally buy EF, RF, E, Z or L mount bayonets for them. The Gnosis are just PL, EF or LPL. There's no option for natively making them fit onto the mirrorless mounts. So in terms of the range, the Laowa swords are definitely more flexible with not only more focal lengths, but also more magnification at each of those focal lengths as well. But let's now look at how the lenses actually look. We're going to be directly comparing the 3 lenses which we can actually match here. So that is the 24 and the 25mm, the 60 and the 65, and the 90 and the 100mm. We do have both the 32 and the 35mm, but sadly our Gnosis 32mm is an LPL mount with no way of us actually swapping it back right now. So unfortunately we can't directly compare those two. So let's focus on the other three pairs instead, and let's go through each area, starting with probably the most important area for macro cinema lenses, of course. How close can you actually get to your subjects? We had a stack of DVDs on the table and simply moved them closer and closer until we got to each lens's minimum focus distance. And as you can see, the swords do consistently get closer. To compare sharpness, we filmed our usual setup with the bookcases here in the showroom. On the 24 and 25mm, both look sharp at the center wide open, but the Gnosis definitely resolves more detail, even once we stop both lenses down to t5.6. At the edges, neither lenses do fantastically well, to be honest, but at least it's fairly even. On the 60 and 65mm, things get much closer. In the center, it is hard to pick which one is the more detailed lens here. Both do very well indeed. I think the Laowa does look slightly sharper at t5.6, but it is very close. At the edges, again, neither lens does amazingly well, but here I think the Gnosis is a bit better this time, especially at t5.6. At 90 and 100mm, it's also too close to call really. In the center, I'm having difficulty seeing much difference between either of the wide open or at t5.6. At the edges though, there is a big difference here, which was a surprise. Both lenses are much better than their previous focal lengths, but the Laowa 100mm, that is a clear winner, significantly sharper at the edges than the Gnosis 90mm, both wide open and at t5.6. Okay, let's now look at focus breathing. Now, it is worth saying that on a macro lens, you do expect some focus breathing, especially on more affordable options. It's much harder to achieve a lens with no breathing and that amount of focus travel. But that being said, these lenses do have some focus breathing. At 25mm, the Laowa sword is surprisingly bad, to be honest. The Gnosis 24 does have some, but just look at the Laowa. It's some of the most focus breathing I've seen in a while. Luckily, at 60mm, things are much more controlled. Both lenses have a decent amount, but this is much more what I was expecting to see from these lenses considering their macros, and both lenses are quite equal. Once we get to 90 and 100mm, the tables have turned. The Laowa now looks slightly better to me, but again, it's fairly close. Overall, I think the advantage has to go to the Gnosis lenses for breathing, simply because of the consistency across the range. Both lenses do struggle with breathing compared to regular cinema primes, but the Laowa swords, they definitely are struggling a bit more. In our bokeh tests, both lens sets look really nice. Simple, even bokeh, which doesn't call too much attention to itself. The Laowa lenses are a bit softer and smoother and less defined, and there's no fringing or noticeable onion skinning or even much shape cutting on either lenses, which is really nice to see. So this has been quite an interesting comparison, as each lens set has areas that they clearly win out in. The Gnosis lenses, they're better built, definitely, but the swords have a much more flexible range option. The swords also have much better magnification, but the Gnosis are a bit more consistent in their image quality performance. But I guess the important thing really is the price. You can't ignore that, as right now the Gnosis lenses are £4,300 each lens, while the swords are £1,265 each. That is a big difference. You can buy a set of 4 sword lenses for only a little bit more than one Gnosis Prime. But which would you actually choose for your work? Let us know in the comments. If you want to try any of these out for yourself, then book a demo with the team here at ProAV. And if you want to buy any of this or any of the other kit we talk about, we would of course be happy to help. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.